Okay, we'll start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Happy Elul. We are now, the month of Elul has launched and we are on our way to Rosh Hashanah. So I wanted to talk about the month of Elul for today. And we're going to call this, our theme today is on second thought, on second thought. And it has to do with the ability to reconsider everything, what we've done, why we've done it, taking a second look. So we're going to talk about that based on the word Elul. So what's very interesting is we've spoken about before in previous times that Elul is the only month where we look for and have lots of different hints in the, not in the gematria, but in the letters. So Elul is spelled Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed. That spells Elul. And there is a whole list of phrases from the Torah, from Tanakh, that either start with those letters or end with those letters, or have those letters in them in proximate, not even necessarily in the same order. It could be Aleph, Lamed, Lamed, Vav, as far as the first letters or the last letters. The question is, why are we making such a huge effort to look for those or find them? We don't do that with the month of Nisan. We don't even do that with the month of Tishrei, which you would expect, because that's the month that's so packed with holidays that has so much in it. You would expect that we would really focus our attention in that way. But no, we only do it for the month of Elul. So we're going to talk about even just that concept of why we're even doing that, of making such a big deal out of it. But we're going to start with, it's very interesting. I listened to this class from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein. I did not write out all of the sources, but from different books and different Sfarim and different sources, there are 40 different references to Elul in Tanakh, of either like Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li. Ani starts with an Aleph, Lidodi starts with a Lamed, Vidodi starts with a Vav, Li starts with a Lamed, spelling Elul. There's Ish L'rei Ehu, Umatanot Le'evyonim, a person to his friend and gifts to the poor, from the Megillah of Esther, also starts. That's the same thing. There are phrases, there are all sorts of phrases everywhere. And altogether, the ones that have been found, that there are 40 of them. Does that ring a bell? Like, why would we even want 40? Was it like that they found 35? It's like, no, we need like 5 more. We need to find 5 more references to the month of Elul until we hit the number 40. Honestly, I only thought there were like 4 or 5. When I was in earlier years, I thought there was only 1. So it seems like every year there's more, but there are 40 of them. And I guess now it can be checked with a computer and some sort of a programming, but these were all done without a computer search. So there are 40 references to Elul, and they coincide to the 40 days of Teshuva. The 40 days of Teshuva that started on Rosh Chodesh Elul and conclude on Yom Kippur. So we have the month of Elul, and then we have the 10 days of Tishrei, and altogether the 40 days of Teshuva. There's all sorts of things online that you can look up and be part of. 40 days of spiritual growth, 40 days of Teshuva, your 40-day personal plan, all sorts of wonderful references to help use this time in a meaningful way, all about the 40. In fact, another reference to 40 is that the Hebrew letter for the month of Elul is the letter Yud. Okay, the letter Yud is the month of Elul, and that letter, that little tiny letter, is the last letter in the most common phrase that we see, Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li. Ani ends with a Yud, Lidodi ends with a Yud, Vidodi ends with a Yud, and Li ends with a Yud. You take those Yuds at the end of each of those words, and you use the gematria of the letter Yud, which is 10, and you have 4 words with the letter Yud at the end equaling 10 is 40. So it's like all these little hints are just going into our minds as like a subliminal advertising. Remember, like that whole thing, you wonder, like they're telling you go to the movies and they're saying buy Coca-Cola, get popcorn. I feel like Is that why I'm eating all these things? That people are giving me subliminal messages all the time about things that we should be doing and thinking about. It says, why, first of all, why does it have to be subliminal? Why does it have to be so many of them? And why the whole thing anyway? It's like, what is the point of all of that? It's like, okay. On top of that, we have the shofar blowing every morning. So it's like everything is being programmed for us to pay attention. So the question is, what is it we are really supposed to be doing? So there are 70 ways to look at this. So this is a new way to look at it. I wanted to share with you. If we take the word Elul and do the gematria of the word Elul, the Aleph is 1, the 2 lameds are each 30, and then the Vav is 6. So altogether we have, doing the higher level math, we have 67. So 67 is an important number because it is also the gematria of the word Bina. Bina is Bet Yud Nun Hey. Bet is 2, Yud is 10, Nun is 50, and Hey is 5. It also equals 67. Why do we want to know about Bina? It's like, what is Bina? So Bina is, have any of you heard a translation of that word? I mean, as we know, Hebrew is a very conceptual language, so things have very many different dimensions to their translation. But when you hear Bina, do you have a sense of what that is? Does anybody know what Bina is? Have you heard that before? So it means, it's often translated as understanding. Okay, yes, okay, thank you, Lois. Understanding. So what is understanding? So we have lots of different words for knowing things. We have chachma, we have bina, we have da'at. Those things are all combined for Chabad. That's what Chabad is the combination, the cha of chachma, the bet of bina, and the daled of da'at together makes Chabad. That's like all-encompassing knowledge. But what's the difference between, we're going to go to chachma and bina. It says, chachma is the initial idea. The initial idea. Here's an idea. You might say that this is what brainstorming is. If you have a brainstorming session, people just put ideas out there. And then there has to be a process. And if someone says, like, I'm just going to go with the first idea that comes to my mind, and that's what I'm going to go with, how often does that work out to be the very best idea? Now, sometimes it does work, but oftentimes when we act on the first idea without having any understanding of the consequences, the ramifications, and more details around it, we're going to end up making the wrong decision. It says Chachma is the initial, Bina is where we start kind of identifying it, defining it, analyzing it. In the realm of human reproduction, Chachma is all the sperm that comes to a woman. And Bina is, I think we'll just take one of those and go with that. Okay, we can't have all of these ideas. It's not going to work. We need the best idea, and it goes through a process. Now, obviously, I don't know what the process is physiologically and how that happens exactly, other than what I learned in my early classes as a teenager. But the idea that there are a lot of ideas that are initial ways of understanding something that on second thought and at looking at it again and looking at it more thoroughly and investigating to get to a place, as Lois said, to a place of understanding. When I understand something, then I am more likely to make a different decision. So when we look at the mistakes we've made in our lives, or the things we've done, even, I won't even call it a mistake. We were doing something a certain way. And then it was like, on second thought, I think there's a better way. I think there's an improvement that can be made here. I think we could do something differently. So it doesn't have to be necessarily, oh, this was like a fatal flaw. It can just be like, well, that worked for then, but doesn't work for now. It worked when I was 64, but it's not going to work when I'm 65. So it's on second thought. So it's on second thought, I'd like to look at this again. Having an on second thought is different than saying, I'm evil. Okay, so it's a different way of approaching the process of evaluating our lives, of evaluating our perspectives, our behaviors, the way we talk, the way we think, the way we act. All of that is like, on second thought, I think I'd like to do this differently. That is not so, what can I say? I don't know. It's not as depressing as thinking like, well, I did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, and this wrong. It's like, on second thought, I think I'll do this a little bit differently. The word bina is related to the word bane, and it means to be able to tell the difference between one thing or another or underneath. On the surface, it looks like this, but on second thought, and think about the language we use, upon further reflection, after thinking about it, after analyzing it, then I go through a process of saying, I'm coming to a different conclusion. This is what we are supposed to do during the month of Elul. Says this is a subtle process because, again, it requires us to evaluate things not on the surface level. It involves being able to go in and define things more clearly. It requires clarity. It requires being able to be open to nuances. Instead of saying like, oh, that's fine. It's like, well, let's think about it. Does this really work? This idea of Bina and being able to do this is required for the real process of Teshuva. When we're trying to think about how can I upgrade my life and improve things for the next coming year, I want to go through this process of on second thought. I want to take a closer look to see what is leading to my behaviors, my attitudes, whatever it might be, is like, let's take a second look. Now, what's interesting, it says, is that wise people, a person who is wise, is open to hints. They don't need to be hit over the head with everything. So the rabbi gave this example. He said, you have company who came over and they're kind of staying. And it's the evening and you're getting tired. And, the host says to the guest, like, oh, it's getting late. You must be tired. And the guest is like, oh, no, I'm fine. And it's like, and she says to the person, she says to her spouse, someone else, well, honey, you look like you're a little tired. Did you want to, kind of start getting ready for bed? It's like, oh yeah, you go ahead. We'll just continue on talking. It's like, you did not take the hint. Said, you shouldn't have to say, it's time for you to go now. Would you like to leave? So it says, a wise person is open to the subtleties around them of the messages they are getting, which means that when we're taking a second look process, we don't need to wait, and we shouldn't have to wait for something to smack us in the face in order to take a second look. It needs to be more subtle. And that's the reason why these references to Elul are subtle. They're going to be the first letters of a phrase. They're going to be the last letters of a phrase. They're going to be the letters not even in the same order, where what is it you need to do? You need to look for them. It's not going to be that there's a passage in the Torah that says, do teshuva right now and reconsider everything you've done. There's going to be hints. And there are hints in our lives, in our relationships. Is there something that's kind of like, it's a little not so great, but I just kind of like didn't want to really think about it so much, or I don't know, a habit that I have that's not really working for me, but it's not terrible. It's not like I have my face on the front page of the most unwanted list. So I'm not like in that level. It's things that are more subtle, that are even more refined, because our goal is to be at a refined level of mistakes. We don't really want to be in the area where we are in the category of people who are doing such egregious things that were in the paper. The things that we're doing are things that refined, the mistakes that refined people make. And that when you're at that refined level, then you're going to have to look more carefully. They talk about, talking about pollution. It was easier to take steps to get rid of the bulk of pollution by taking whatever steps are taken. It's harder to deal with the marginal, what's left at the end. What's left at the end is kind of like your junk drawer. You can get your whole house organized, and then there's the junk drawer. Okay, there's always like that last little place that's actually harder. It's like, when you're putting things away, there's the easy things and then there's the hard things. And I always go for the low-hanging fruit. Like, let's take care of what's easiest and not what's hardest. because the things that are hardest are the things that are actually much more subtle, require much more understanding, evaluation, and thought. And this kind of understanding is called Bina. Bina is equal to Elul. That's what the month is for. The 40 references to it are all subtle. You have to look for them. And that we're supposed to be looking in our life for the subtle signs. Now, obviously, it's very possible that we have things going on in our life that are much more in our face. So for sure, we want to take care of those things too, but we also want to take care of the subtleties. Women are considered to be gifted with an extra dose of Bina. It says we have what's called Bina Yetera. It's like the Neshama Yetera, the extra dimension of soul that we get as Jewish people on Shabbos, that women have Bina Yetera. They have an extra amount of this Bina, which may mean that we have an extra amount of this ability to look at things. We were gifted with that from creation. If you go into Bereshit, which we are obviously going to be celebrating with Rosh Hashanah, on the creation of women. Hold on one second. Sorry, I didn't. Okay. Page 15, if you're in the Stone Chumash, or chapter 2, verse 21. So Hashem God cast a deep sleep upon the man, and he slept, and he took one of his sides, and he filled in flesh in its place. Then Hashem God fashioned the side that he had taken from the man into a woman. That word of how he made her, it says, Vayiven Hashem Elohim et hatzela. Vayiven is related to the word Bina, that a woman was built with this quality inside of her, as opposed to the man, it says Vayitzar, that he was fashioned, that he was made in a different way, but that a woman was Vayiven, he built her. So we were built with this quality of Bina, and our job is to really cultivate it, because it's like a talent. You can have a talent, but you still have to work to develop it and fine tune it and hone it and all of that. It requires some stepping back, which is also considered the feminine, and I'm not going to say like the woman. This doesn't mean to be shy and retiring and not seen or any of that. It means the ability to step back and to see. This is the role of the advisor, or the person who can, the role of the advisor. So this was the role of Chava. It says when God created her, he created her as a spiritual advisor to Adam. She was supposed to understand what was right and what wasn't right, which is why her sin of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was bad enough, but the worst idea was encouraging him to do it. You're supposed to be the spiritual advisor. That's like having your accountant advise you on how to cheat on your taxes, or your lawyer advising you how to do something dishonest. It's like you are the person who is supposed to be in charge of this, and you let him down. So this is why we carry more responsibility. We carry responsibility because we were given the gift and the ability to do something different with it and to lead the world in a different direction. This requires, again, having somewhat of a distanced, I won't call it, I don't know what the word is, perspective. The perspective is different when you kind of stand back. It's like somebody's advisor. They're not necessarily on the front line. They're stepping back so they can get a sense of the bigger picture. So that role is considered the feminine role. Now, it's not only done by women, because obviously Elul is for men too, and they're supposed to be working on their Bina as well. It's just that we have an advantage in that we were gifted with more of it. The factory model came equipped with more of it. And so our goal is to use it. So that's the thing. Yes, Andy.
I have a question about, I don't know the definition of Yakera. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you. Yetera comes from the word yoter, and it means more. More as in expansive. Od, there's two words in Hebrew. Od means more, as like, would you like more ice cream? Like, yes, I would like more. You don't say yoter. Yoter might be like, I'd like a bigger serving, something that is what it is, but it's expanded as opposed to another one.
Thank you.
So we have a bigger dose of the Bina, which means that the whole idea of Elul should resonate with us. Interestingly, the astrological sign for the month of Elul is Virgo, is the Virgin. And that is of the untouched, because Virgin means untouched. Says, but it's the idea of going back to a state of being untouched, and as opposed to, like, I have had something that said on it, virgin Nagahide. I wasn't quite sure what that exactly meant. It's like, I don't know what that means. Nobody had ever touched it, so whatever. So this idea of being untouched is that we're trying to get back to a place during the month of Elul where we regain our spiritual purity. But spiritual purity means a place of not exactly innocence, but innocence. That we take ourselves and we are trying to get back to the factory model of get back to where we have been, where we were when we first started out our lives, and that what during the year has happened because we were operating perhaps from a place of chachma. It's like, if you think about it, when we make mistakes and when we do things the wrong way, most people don't intentionally do that. I mean, unless you have some sort of a psychological problem, most of us, when we do something, we do it for some reason. We thought it was a good idea, or we weren't thinking clearly. There was something that motivated us. We're just not just like out there, just acting randomly. So to recognize that all of our actions, all of our thinking comes from someplace and has premises. What is the premise that has led to, thank you, Beth Ann, undamaged, very good. So it's a place of healing. So it's a place of healing. It's a restoration of healing to a place of, like, it's a factory reset. It's like, you push this little thing. I do this on my phone sometimes, push this and this at the same time, and it goes back to whatever the factory reset is. Elul is go back to the factory reset. Whatever kind of got jumbled throughout the year needs to be reset. And that's the process, but the process requires this evaluation and analysis and on second thought, Most people respect somebody who says on second thought. It shows a degree of thoughtfulness, of responsibility, of maturity. Like, on second thought, that was really not a good idea for me. I need to rethink this. So this is what the month of Elul is for. And it's a month where nothing else is happening. There are no holidays. It's the pre-holiday holiday. But we can understand how it's essential in order to go into Rosh Hashanah. A person who shows up on Rosh Hashanah expecting to have an amazing experience it's not possible. It isn't possible. So this pre-work is what Elul is all about. When we said initially that the first ideas, it says that would be a bad idea, it says almost guaranteed, with few exceptions, there are exceptions, that any first idea is not going to be the right one. Why not? Why isn't the first idea going to be a good idea? Any thoughts? What's going to be wrong with the first idea?
Maybe too emotional.
Okay, it can be coming place from an emotional place. We don't know where it came from. It could be spurred by emotion. Riva. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Do you want to type it in your chat? While Riva's typing, does anybody else have a thought of why is the first thought not going to be the good one? Andy.
You might jump to conclusions by not thinking it through, or like you said, second thought.
Okay, good. So exactly what your at least on my screen, your classmate right next to you is Riva. So you have same idea here of what you said, that it is the first idea may not have been thought through. So that's the challenge. I mean, first thoughts are great thoughts. because they kind of get the ball rolling. You have to start somewhere. You have to start with something. The challenge is to then not leave it in that place and not act on it until we have more information. Now, there's enough danger, an equal danger, which is to overthink something. You know, you sit there and you think and you think and you think and you think and you're ruminating, going over and over and over again, and that's also not going to be helpful. So at some point, you have to come to a decision and to a conclusion in order to act. But having a first thought and then going with it, I have to say, this is very hard for me. I have initial ideas, then I'm always sure like this is the great idea. Now, I have to say, in many cases, it worked. In my husband, I was right. He was the one that I wanted to marry. And I made that decision when I was 15, and that was a correct decision. And we walked into our house. I'm like, I'll take it. And that was a correct decision also. So there's a lot of things that have been the correct decision when they're the first thing. So it's not 100% guaranteed, but the first decision can be confirmed. It doesn't mean necessarily that it isn't the right decision. It just needs to have something else behind it. It has to be more deeply considered. And upon being more deeply considered, it will be either fleshed out and like, yes, confirm this was a good idea, but now I know why. I have more information. I've thought it through. Or I think it through is like, you know what? On second thought. So it's still, they're both second thoughts. One is to either affirm, it's more like a flow chart. Initial idea, second thought, this is true, it's a good idea, or no, it's not a good idea. And then take it from there. So this is where we want to operate. This is the time where we are required to take time. So the number 40 is also connected to the idea of process. 40 is about process. It's about the process in the physical world for something to happen. So we talk about the 40 weeks of pregnancy. You can't really get around it. Now, yes, you can have a premature baby or whatever, but we call it premature. We don't say, you know, she was in such a rush. She wanted the 6-month version of a pregnancy or the 2-month version. We're going to go with that. It's like, no, it's 40 weeks. That's the process. 40 days on Mount Sinai for Moshe, 3 times. 40 years in the desert for the Jewish people. All the different 40s that we have are about process. So we're saying that Teshuva is also process. This isn't, you know, this isn't I don't want to say it's necessarily a Christian idea, but this isn't like how other faiths have of like, I repented, I'm saved, and like now all is good. It's like, really? What did you do? What did you think about? What did you analyze? What did you evaluate? What's your plan? So our process is a process that takes time. It's a process that takes into account thinking, evaluating, making a plan. How am I going to change? What structures do I need in place in order to make it happen? This is a month's worth. This is a 40-day process. Because again, walking into Rosh Hashanah, I'm like thinking like, oh, I'm having this new year. It's going to be new, but it's not going to be different. It's going to be the word Shana, Rosh Hashanah. Shana is related to 2 words, to change and to repeat. A shinui is a change. Like in halacha, if you need to do something on Shabbos that normally you are not supposed to do, there's some ways to do something where you do it with a shinui. You do it with a change in some different way so that you can go ahead and do it. Consult your local Orthodox rabbi about how that works. But a shinui. Shaneh also means to do again, to repeat. The book of Devarim, the entire book of Devarim is called the Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah, that Moshe is repeating it. So there's repetition with change. And the challenge is, how much repetition do we want of the same thing next year, same mistakes, same everything? Do I want to be in the pattern that I was in, or do I want something different? Going back to my Elul, if I do Elul right and invest the time into going through a Bina process, I have a much better chance of having my Rosh Hashanah be a time where it is a repetition of some things that I've thought through that I would like to repeat, and a shinui, a change of some things that I do not want to repeat that need to be put aside. So this is the month of Elul, such a powerful time. So this is kind of funny. It's only 11:30. That was the bulk of what I wanted to share with you. And so I'd also like to hear people, any questions you have about anything specific to do or ideas for what to look at or how to help this process, anything that anybody would like to ask. I would like to hear any questions that you have. Do you have any? Andy.
I'm so sorry to go back. I was late and I apologize.
That's
But
okay.
may I get the definition of Bina, please?
Yes, Bina means understanding. And it means understanding that comes from taking a second look, of
Okay.
looking more deeply, of what is Bane, what is in between. Like Bane, this and this means between. What's the difference between this and this? On the surface, they look the same, but they're not. There is something different. And the more wisdom and clarity we have about something, the more we can diagnose it. That's why we go to experts for everything. You know, I have a headache. Well, why do I have a headache? I mean, I don't know. Do I have a tumor? Do I have the flu? Do I have a virus? Did I bump my head? Am I under stress? You know, saying I have a headache doesn't really tell me anything. It alerts me to the fact that I need to find out why. So the chachma is, I have a headache. The bina is, I need to understand why, because it's not until I understand what it is that I can then address it. So there's the same thing with the month of Elul. I have my actions. It doesn't really help me to say, I spoke harshly to this person. Okay, why? Why? What's behind it? Were you tired? Were you annoyed? Were you angry? Were you whatever? It's like, I need to think about this and look at it more carefully. So this whole process is like a personal therapy. It's a therapy month of going into, and one can do it with a friend, because sometimes it's hard to look at ourselves, but we can get pretty far looking at ourselves. We really can get pretty far. If you go through a list of all the different things in our lives, we can really get pretty far. And do you have something further?
Definition of Chachma, please.
Chachma is called wisdom, and it's defined as the initial idea. The brainstorming idea is a dump of Chachma. I know, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. That's called Chachma. Bina is when you have all the ideas on the table and you say, let's take a second look and identify what is a good idea and what might not be a good idea. And again, the thing in which I think I would really like to emphasize is we don't always have to identify it with mistakes. It can just be that it doesn't serve us now. We're at a new level. It's just like for a child, behavior that was fine for a 2-year-old, that's not appropriate for a 5-year-old. It's like, you can't do that anymore. So our challenge is that we think that only goes up to, like, I don't know, age 21, and then you're good. The truth is that this is an ongoing process. Like, as I said before, what's appropriate for a 64-year-old may not be appropriate for a 65-year-old. Just not. It's like we have an expectation of ongoing growth and maturing and developing, and we are not supposed to flatline spiritually. It's not appropriate. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I made this big mistake. It'd be like, that was for then, and now what's for now? What is appropriate for now? And again, we focus on this, and I know that Andy is a former teacher, Riva is a teacher, and I'm not sure who else has been in education, but we're very concerned about doing things that are age appropriate, and the individual, of where's the individual within the age appropriateness. It's very personalized. So I need to know, me as a 65-year-old is not the same as somebody else, and their life experience and where they are, and on their journey, it's maybe different, but I need to know where I am, and I need to make adjustments, and I should have an expectation of ongoing continued growth and change, because I don't want my Rosh Hashanah. Yes, that's why, yes, to an ICU nurse, flatlining means the patient may be dead. Yes, that's exactly the metaphor. So a person can be physically alive and spiritually dead, and we call that dead. So that's exactly what we don't want to be. We do not want to be physically alive and spiritually dead. Spiritually dead means not growing. So we want to have this trajectory where there is an expectation that I am going to continue blossoming in the coming year, and that there's going to be a shinui. There's going to be a change. Now, a lot of us are thinking like changes we want to see happen to us. We want coronavirus to go away. We want, the fires in California to go out. The things that we want to change from the outside, but we're not saying, and what are we going to change about ourselves? It's like, well, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the government should be changing, and this should be changing, and society should be changing. It's like, that is a wonderful conversation to have, and usually very unproductive. So the conversation in Elul is, what do I expect from myself for this coming year? What would I like to see? And I need to be able to visualize it. So that's the other part of this process, is that we are supposed to try to visualize ourselves in our upgraded, updated, new and improved version. What would I look like if I was acting in this way or doing this thing? What would I look like if I was saying, what would it look like and feel like if I was saying a prayer in the morning, if I was saying Modeh Ani? What would it look like if I took 10 minutes to say the Shema in the morning and the morning blessings? What would it look like? All of these things need to be visualized in some way. And having a way to kind of think about that, not just a list of things to do, but a visualization of what I want to become. So Janice asking, curious if anyone has changed something small specifically that made an impact. Yeah, that's a great question. Does anybody have something they'd like to offer on that? Something small, a small change that made a big impact of anything that they did. This is a place for bragging. You're allowed to say. It's also a place not to feel embarrassed that you changed the tiniest thing and you can't believe it made an impact. Andy.
When I'm using the water in the morning to wash my hands, brush my teeth, whatever, I turn it off while I'm doing whatever, brushing my teeth, so that I just get the water I need, and hoping that that's saving a little bit of water for the planet, or not turning the shower on too early, just trying to be more aware. I don't know.
Very good. Okay, so that's a good environmental action. Exactly, a good environmental action. What about a spiritual act? Something that has changed yourself, of your character, your practice, your observance, your connection to Hashem, anything like that. Anybody has? I'll share something that I did. And Riva, were you going to say something? You can put it in the chat because we want to hear from you. Even though we can't hear you, we want to hear from you. One of the things that I did on the beginning of my spiritual journey many, many years ago was to stop reading the newspaper on Shabbos. It's like, on Shabbos, you're supposed to be joyful and happy, and you're supposed to be in the moment. I'm like, I'm not reading the paper on Shabbos. So that did two things. Number one, it improved my mood. Number two, it meant that I needed to find something else to read, which is how I accumulated my vast library, was from not reading on Shabbos, not reading the newspapers. Like, I need to read something. So I started, and that's how I started collecting and started learning, and it went to that. It was really amazing. Okay, here's from Riva. The small thing I've done is that whenever I feel slightly annoyed or about another Jew, I switch to, I love so-and-so because she or he is a Jew. It totally switches my mindset. Any annoyance flows away. Shalom is especially important in Elul. That is beautiful. That is great. Thank you so much. That's a great tip, and it's a great idea. And Riva, I try to give the benefit of, I'm sorry, that before was from Rachel. I try to give the benefit of the doubt to people, and I look at my neighbors and acquaintances more positively. Beautiful. Improving my mood and state of mind was closing my Facebook account. More power to you. That's amazing. See, you guys are amazing. Look at this. That is great. Okay, that is wonderful. All of those ideas. And, I think we spoke about this after the Meron disaster and the boy who was killed from my son's yeshiva, Donnie Morris. And people took on things for the 30 days until Shloshim. And the things were simple things of, one was to smile at every person and to be the first to greet another. Be the first to greet another. It's like, this doesn't say I memorized the Talmud. It doesn't say I'm keeping kosher at every second. It's like, be the first to say hello. Be the first to say hello. That kindness and that shalom says, this is huge, huge, huge. It says, we're going into a time of judgment of us. It says, how do we want to be judged by God? It's like, we want to be judged favorably. We cannot be hypocritical. We can't say, I want to be judged favorably, but I want to judge everybody else harshly. Like, this is going to be a midah keneged midah, a measure for measure situation. The more we are judging other people favorably, that causes God to say, whatever approach you use with others is the approach I'll use with you. It's just, that's fair. That's fair. And Riva, I love that, or whoever it says that of, if you're Jewish, I love you because you're a fellow Jew, giving the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of the doubt is actually considered judging fairly. Why is it? You could say, well, that's not fair. That's like giving preferential treatment. Like, why should I give him the benefit of the doubt? Because we don't know the whole picture. It says, when we judge, and my favorite all-time book for this is The Other Side of the Story. The Other Side of the Story is a great time to read it, is during the month of Elul, about we don't know why people do what they do. And there is very likely a good explanation. And even if there isn't a good explanation, when we come up with a good explanation and we give them, it's called to judge the whole person to the side of merit. Judge everyone to the side of merit, because I don't know. And you know what? I don't know why I do what I do. So how am I supposed to exactly know why other people do what they do? So judging someone favorably is actually considered, that is justice, which does fit in the Parsha of Shoftim. Shoftim is about judges and officers shall you assign. It says, well, what kind of judges? Judges for us, the judge to the side of favorably. This is a good time to use and place to use our imagination and come up with scenarios about how the person did not do something wrong, or what appears to be wrong to us that might not be, or to come up with a scenario, a bigger understanding. And this, I would say, is a use of Bina as well. On the surface, it looks like they did whatever annoying thing. That's like, I saw that. I heard it. I saw it with my own eyes, and I know that is what they did. Bina is understanding. Why did they do what they did? Is there an explanation that I haven't thought of yet? On second thought, maybe not. You know, in the example that's given, that I've heard speakers quote this all the time, about the man in Israel on the bus, gets on with his children. The children are running around crazy and annoying everybody. And everyone's like looking at him like, what kind of a father is he? And he's not even controlling his children, blah, blah, blah. And then finally somebody says something to him. It's like, you know, your kids. And he says like, I'm so sorry, I just came from the hospital. My wife died and I just don't know what to do. And all of a sudden everybody on the bus was like, oh. We don't have all the information. We think we're such chachams, and it's interesting. People use the word chacham in a sarcastic way also. So we know at Passover, that's the wise son. Chacham mahu omer, the wise child, what does he say? But in Yiddish, if someone says to him like, oh, he's such a chacham, that doesn't mean he's smart. It means like he's such a know-it-all, or a wise guy, or he's the opposite of. Because the problem with chachma is it can be wrong until bina is applied, until there is further understanding applied. When we are trying to understand why we do what we do and take a second look, is a beautiful opportunity to include other people in that process and the use of our Bina. And it's a great way to develop it, to be understanding, to be compassionate. This does not mean to be a doormat. It just means to understand where people are coming from and to come up with a way to judge them favorably. It was mentioned in the chat, again, so let's address it also, is about Hashem being accessible. Hashem being accessible, and let's see, let's go back to the question. Now I can't find it. That Hashem is from Beth Ann, thank you. That Hashem is so close in Elul, how is that connected? That's a really great question. Yes, it says the king is in the field. The king is in the field and accessible. You don't have to, no appointments necessary. You know, you can, Hashem is very, very close. Because our main operating phrase is Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, we're talking about I am to my beloved as my beloved is to me. My beloved is close to me. We're talking about an intimate relationship with Hashem. And that intimacy is what brings the closeness. And it also is supposed to inspire us. When I say to be worthy, I mean, it's like, you know, if you're going to be with your beloved, you want to look good, you want to feel good, you want to be good. It's like when you're with your partner, you want to be a match for them. And that when God is close, it's like, I want to be close to God also. Now, God takes us however we are. God takes us however we are. That being said, because it's unconditional love, God's love for us is unconditional. That being said, we want to show up. We want to show up in the best way possible. So here I am. Andy, as far as who wrote the book, does that address the question, Beth Ann? Just as far as, yeah, that closeness. And we should take it as a sign of, I think it helps that when we have God is the big scary king who's looking to, you know, look over our record and find us wanting, when we have that image, then going through a Teshuva second look process feels a little bit more daunting and scary and intimidating. When it's in the company of your loving creator who wants you and loves you no matter what, it's a much more comfortable place to be for that introspection and conversation. As far as the book of The Other Side of the Story, I have it upstairs. I don't know who wrote it. It's a woman. You can certainly Google it. I'm sure you'll find it, The Other Side of the Story. And it has and these are all true stories. And I've shared with you in the past, but I'm always reminded of it. Hold on a second, let's see what time it is. Okay. Of when we had, thank you very much, Patricia, Rebbitzin Samet. Okay, S-A, it's there in the, and then there's also Meaningful Life is from Rabbi Jacobson. He also does the Omer, the Sphere account, and he has something for the Days of Teshuva. There's so many resources there for us. We have a lot of help in this process. Plus, we also have the help of knowing that some Jewish people around the world are going through the same process we are. We really want to make it count. Our world is in quite a situation. We need transformation quite significantly. We always have, but we really need it. Our efforts make a difference. When we were talking before about judging people favorably, I've shared the story before when I was in the process of teaching this book. And we had 2 guests staying with us at our house one summer, 2 young men, and they were with us. It was over the holidays, and they were sleeping downstairs, and they were lovely people. They're from Israel. And after they left, I went downstairs to kind of clean up, and my 2 good bath towels were missing. And my first response was, the boys took my towels. Not just took, the boys stole my towels. That was my first thought. And then I thought, why would they steal my towels? They were my good towels. I didn't put out like the kind of extra junky ones. I put like my really good towels. I'm like, I can't believe it. They stole my towels. And I thought, then the second thought, that makes no sense whatsoever. Why would they steal my towels? They're going to steal something from my house. It's not going to be my towels. So I had to come up with a scenario. Why did they steal my towels? Like, well, they didn't steal their towels. They must have, because they rolled up their sleeping bags and it was dark and they left early in the morning. The towels were dark colored. They probably just ended up getting thrown in with other stuff as guys anyway. It's not like it was like the neatest thing in the world. They just ended up in their stuff, and they'll see it and they'll return them. And then I had calmed down, and sure enough, 2 weeks later, we got a package in the mail of these fresh smelling towels with a lovely note saying, we had such a wonderful time at your house. We feel so horrible. We were in such a rush cleaning up, and we pulled out, and your towels ended up in our stuff. We were at the Tetons. We waited until we get to a laundromat so that we can wash them and send them back to you. And thank you so much. So I was like, I'm so glad they did not hear my first thought. It's so embarrassing. 2 years later, I get an email from one of the guys saying he's married and he wants to come with his bride on a trip to the United States. And they had such a good time at our house. Could he and his wife stay with us again for Shabbos? And I was like, of course. And I said to my husband, and we'll give him our best towels. So he came back, and yes, this is a very wonderful person. Unfortunately, his brother was murdered by terrorists in Israel. This was Henkin. And his mother was the head of a women's school in Israel. So this is a very well-known, prominent person. And I'm like, he stole my towels. So am I responsible for my first thought? Not so much. I'm not proud of it, but I'm responsible for Bina. I'm responsible for a second thought and deeper understanding. It's like, on second thought, let's think that through. How likely was that really? And is there any possible explanation? Any possible explanation? And to come up with it. And then in fact, it turned out to be exactly the case. And that's what the other side of the story really points out, is this explanation that you come up with in your head that justifies the person is often exactly what really happened. So we want to justify, and we want to give God explanations of like, don't just look at the surface of what I did. Can I explain like the deeper reason, like what happened, what I wasn't thinking, my weaknesses, my insensitivities, my sensitive, whatever it might be. So I want to judge other people the same way. And at the same time, I want to use Bina to go through my life and come to deeper understanding and clarity to figure out what I can change. Hopefully with that, we will really create a Shana Tova Umetuka. It'll be a good and sweet year that will have both Shaneh, it'll be a repetition, but it will also have a Shinui. There will also be changes that I implement. Small changes, environmental changes, health changes. People do things of, people say I diet or whatever, I don't eat after 8 o'clock. Or whatever it is, that there are very small acts that can change trajectory. And it's important to not become overwhelmed and think, I have to rewrite the whole script of my life in order to make a difference. Like, no, sometimes it's a minor edit. Sometimes it's just a minor edit that can make a huge difference. So thank you for inspiring me and being with me and sharing this process. It's really helpful. And I look forward to seeing you next week. You should have a wonderful Shabbos, a wonderful week, rest of your week and weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. If anybody has any other comments or questions, feel free. If anybody has anything else they wanted to say. Okay, thank you for joining us from Houston, from Baltimore, from Denver, from wherever everybody's coming from. Our pleasure. Thank you, Lois.
Shalom, Ellyn.
Okay, have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Take care.
You too. Thanks, Ellyn.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.